Khomeini, pour moi, avant tout, c'est un homme politique. Et qui a réussi, en fin de compte, de créer un pouvoir totalement innové. Il a inventé le pouvoir qu'il a créé.
Khomeini's Islam is to the Islamic religion what the Inquisition is to Christianity.
It's the concept of Oriental despotism. The Shah is one head of it, and Khomeini is the other head. One is monarchy, and the other is religion.
In 1978, Iran's revolution was sparked in the holy city of Qom. A written attack on the exiled Ayatollah Khomeini led to rioting in the streets. Ruhollah Khomeini had become a symbol of freedom to millions of oppressed Iranians. For more than 2 decades, they'd suffered imprisonment, torture, and execution.
Almost every major intellectual from 1953 up to 1979 experienced some kind of imprisonment, torture.
The Shah's secret police, Savak, were ubiquitous.
Un Iranien n'acceptait pas de me rencontrer seul, avec un autre Iranien. Il voulait toujours être seul, parce qu'il avait peur que l'autre Iranien puisse être de la Savak. Ce qui, pour moi, était la meilleure manière d'illustrer le fait que la Savak pouvait être partout, pouvait être n'importe qui, et que tout le monde en avait une peur extraordinaire.
Does torture happen in Iran?
Well, this is a question that was put to me more than once, and which I don't like at all.
So the torture, fingernail pulling, people being toasted in wire mesh, which we were reading about in the English papers?
We don't have to torture people. This is the way that unsophisticated organizations were doing things.
Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, was the 3rd generation of the Pahlavi dynasty, imposed by the West. In 1953, the CIA overthrew a left-wing democratic movement and restored the Shah to power. American weapons and training made him invincible. Iran stood between the former Soviet Union and the strategic Persian Gulf.
Le plus grand architecte de la révolution iranienne n'est pas Khomeini, n'est pas les gens qui étaient autour de Khomeini, c'est le Shah lui-même. Dans l'histoire de l'Iran, toujours les mollahs étaient une force considérable. Mais les tribus aussi étaient en face d'eux. Les intellectuels, les hommes de gouvernement aussi étaient en face d'eux. Les confréries des commerçants aussi étaient en face d'eux. Et le roi jouait avec l'équilibre de ces forces. C'est le coup d'État de 1953 qui a permis au Shah d'éliminer tout autre.
The only institution that was left that had any clout and organization was the mosque. And it was very powerful.
In 1963, Khomeini was a religious teacher in Qom and well positioned to test the mosque's increasing power. For granting American soldiers immunity in Iran, the Ayatollah proclaimed, "The Shah must go."
Khomeini, en raison de sa position comme un grand dignitaire religieux, est le seul qui a protesté. Et finalement, ça c'était la raison essentielle de son exil. Parce que Khomeini a fait un discours très très dur contre le régime du Shah, et par la suite il a été à nouveau arrêté et tout de suite reconduit vers la frontière avec les agents de la SAVAK, et depuis, Khomeini devient comme une sorte de mythe.
From Iraq, Khomeini's voice still reached the people. Smuggled cassettes kept the revolution's fires burning.
He used these words in a way that they would turn into, immediately, into slogans, and they would be used on the walls. You have to realize that he is, for the Islamic revolution, almost as important as Muhammad himself is.
Young dissidents fleeing the Shah's henchmen also exported the revolution. But America was committed to its longtime ally. In 1978, President Carter toasted the Shah's leadership at a New Year's celebration in Iran.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah, is an island of stability in one of the more troubled areas of the world. This is a great tribute to you, Your Majesty, and to your leadership, and to the respect and the admiration and love which your people give to you.
The United States had constructed its entire security strategy in the Persian Gulf region, the region with the most oil in the world, a region that was of absolute significance to us. There was no plan B about what if the Shah falls. So nobody even wanted to talk about it. It was, how do you keep the Shah in power? Not because we had any particular doubts about the fact that he was a tyrant, but that our entire security strategy in the region revolved around the Shah.
Iran's student dissidents were, by 1978, an organized opposition in Paris. They wanted Islamic democracy for Iran. Zadeh Khobzadeh and Abul Hassan Bani Saad were at the forefront of the movement.
J'ai publié un livre sur les principes islamiques d'une démocratie. C'est une nouvelle lecture, c'est la première dans notre pays, qui étudie le Coran comme discours de la liberté.
Sadegh and the others wanted to bring a genuine Islamic democracy. Not a theocracy, but a democracy in the same way that we're a Judeo-Christian democracy. We're not ruled by the church, but certain of our principles and our criminal code is based on Judeo-Christian law.
Their government model drew on the enlightened teachings of Ayatollah Taleghani, one of Iran's most respected clerics. But he was not the legendary figure needed to galvanize the revolution. Khobzadeh went several times to Iraq to see Khomeini. After 15 years in the holy city of Najaf, Khomeini moved to Paris, bringing his own prescription for an Islamic republic.
Considérer le peuple comme mineur dans ce texte, donc sans voix. Bon, alors c'est pourquoi je lui ai dit que si vous voulez rester à Paris, vous pouvez répéter la même chose ici, devant tout le monde. Mais si vous voulez un retour triomphal à Téhéran, et c'est à vous que de décider maintenant, ou bien c'est vous souverain, ou c'est le peuple souverain. Et si c'est le peuple souverain, vous devez le dire très clairement, ce qu'il a fait.
Carol Jerome was a CBC reporter in Paris with an inside edge on the revolution. She was romantically involved with Sadegh Khopzadeh.
I will never understand why Sadegh and the others did not fully grasp what Khomeini represented right there and then. That book reads like Mein Kampf.
In Paris, Khomeini became the official voice of the revolution. From here, he stoked the fire. Iran was about to explode. In January 1979, massive demonstrations and crippling strikes forced the Shah and his family to flee Iran.
Et ils n'étaient pas prêts à rentrer. Rien n'était prêt. Ça a été totalement improvisé, tout ça. Mais à partir du moment où l'imam a décidé que c'était mûr et qu'il voulait rentrer, malgré tous les risques, malgré tout ça, il a décidé, tout le monde s'est incliné. Et il a fallu partir.
Khomeini selected over 200 international journalists to record his return to Iran. Carol Jerome was among them.
We knew that this was a turning point in history. And the reporters that didn't get to go on that plane were absolutely dejected.
In the early morning, an Air France plane touched down in Tehran. Iran's faithful believed he was the 12th Imam, a messiah come to create the perfect godly society.
Tout le monde attendait au moins qu'il fasse un discours, par exemple, qu'il vienne serrer la main à certaines personnes, etc. Il n'a rien dit. Il même pas, je dirais, regardé personne. Il est allé directement vers la sortie, entouré par quelques personnes, et finalement il est monté dans une voiture, et voilà.
On the 1st of February 1979, centuries of monarchical rule were swept away. The largest army in the Middle East bent to the will of the people.
The Shah was over, as Khomeini put it in his own succinct way, Shahmat, which means checkmate.
Khomeini handpicked a provisional government and named Mehdi Bazargan prime minister. Bazargan led the Democratic Party ousted by America nearly 3 decades before. The Imam also appointed a council to guide the revolution, a volatile mix of his allies from Paris and hardline clerics. Those of the cloth were his loyal students from Qom.
Si il rassemblait des gens, c'était uniquement par la surenchère. Il ne pouvait pas partager le pouvoir. Avec les hommes tels que Khomeini, il faut allégeance totale. Il faut obéissance complète. Lui-même, il utilisait une expression. Il faut que les gens se fondent dans la personne de leur guide.
In the early days of the revolution, comités sprung up across the country. Militia groups took over the streets. Iran was swept up in revolution. Ibrahim Yazdi, Khomeini's choice for foreign minister, was at the center of the storm.
They arrested, captured many of the army officers and brought them to the headquarters of the provisional government where we were stationed. And people, they were so excited that they very openly were saying that if you don't do anything, we will not bring them here. We will kill them right on the spot. We said, no, you have to bring them to the headquarters. But what to do with them was another story.
4 of the Shah's generals were shot and their bodies put on display.
Many people were happy that those people were shot, see. And then the shootings went on.
Two weeks after Khomeini's return to Iran, the mob turned on the West. The Mujahideen, a militant left-wing organization, seized the American embassy, but within a few hours they were ordered out.
Mr. Khomeini and Bazargan asked me to go and take care. So I went there and was able to manage and control the situation.
The Mujahideen were recognized right from the get-go as the enemies of Khomeini's revolution and Sadeg's organization and the rest. So Bazargan and Yazdi moved immediately against them.
To keep control of the masses, Khomeini appointed Sadegh Khobzadeh director of broadcasting.
And he immediately introduced censorship. Those people who had risen against the Shah's censorship and had liberated actually the Iranian TV, they were thrown out.
Sadegh, par la suite, est entré au Conseil de la Révolution. Et finalement, ils ont commencé peu à peu à, si vous voulez, d'abord à déranger le gouvernement de Bazargan, avec lequel Sadegh n'était pas en accord total, parce qu'il pensait à son pouvoir. Sadegh, Bani Sadr aussi. Ces gens-là, vraiment, n'avaient jamais collaboré au sens exact du terme avec le gouvernement de Bazargan, parce que chacun était pour son avenir, pour son pouvoir, etc. Ça veut dire que Sadegh et Bani Sadr, les deux, au départ, ils ont aidé les islamistes contre les libéraux, contre les démocrates.
Khobzadeh's close friend and ally confronted him about human rights abuses under the new regime.
Il nous dit, mais attendez, ça, de toute façon, les Français, vous, il y a eu la terreur chez vous après la Révolution. Vous êtes bien mal placés pour nous reprocher d'en faire autant, et on ne le fait pas au même niveau que vous. Qu'on dise qu'en France, il y a eu la terreur, c'est un fait historique. Mais ce n'est pas pour ça qu'on justifie la terreur. Quand elle a eu lieu, on dit elle a eu lieu, qu'est-ce que vous voulez qu'on y fasse? On ne va pas changer ça. Mais vous êtes en train de faire l'histoire.
Iran's draft constitution was a testament to how far astray the revolution had gone. It enshrined the rule of religious authority, giving ultimate power to the supreme leader, Khomeini.
Some influential clergy, such as Mr. Beheshti, he believed that after revolution, to have a democratic situation is nonsense. He even told us that the Marx and Lenin were right, that after revolution we need a proletarian dictatorship. And then he says, since we are Muslim, we don't believe in Marxism, we should have the righteous man's dictatorship.
Ayatollah Taleghani, Hobzadeh's spiritual inspiration for the revolution, opposed the idea of clerical rule. He warned the people to beware of despotism masquerading as religion. A few days after denouncing the constitution, Ayatollah Taleghani died. The only person able to match Khomeini's strength was gone.
To me, that the personage and the beliefs of Taleghani are the most important loss in this whole tragedy, from then right up to today and Al-Qaeda. Because there are not those voices that are there isn't the voice of Taleghani, somebody of his stature, that is saying, this is not Islam. This is not what was meant by the Prophet. This is wrong.
In Egypt, the Shah talked of returning to Iran, but he was ill. He wanted to go to America for treatment, but President Carter was reluctant to let him in.
He was the last man standing in that whole process, that one after another of his colleagues, his associates, the people who worked with him in the White House, one after the other, they came to the conclusion that we had to let the Shah come in. Carter continued to hold out, and finally all of his advisors were saying they wanted to do it unanimously. And at that point he said, well, okay. He said, but what are you going to say to me when our people are taken hostage in Tehran?
On the 4th of November, less than 2 weeks after the Shah's arrival in New York, the US embassy in Tehran was under attack. Within minutes, the compound was overrun. 52 Americans were taken hostage. Unlike the first embassy seizure, this time the attackers were Khomeini supporters. They called themselves student followers of the Imam's line.
We pretty much all thought that the trick was to get through the first day or two without losing anybody, without getting people killed, and that then cooler heads would prevail and the government would intervene, very much like the previous case.
The Americans had no idea how wrong that assessment would turn out to be. Just hours after the attack, Hobzadeh sent news cameras to the scene. Iranian television praised the occupation.
And Sadegh made the mistake of thinking that if he could sound like he was the person in charge of this whole gesture, then he could get control of it and pull the students out. That's how naive he was about the forces that he was playing with.
Yazdi, who put an end to the first embassy seizure 9 months ago, acted quickly.
When the compound was overrun in Sunday, in the afternoon, I went to Qom and I talked with Khomeini. He told me who they are. Go and kick them out. But however, in the evening, when this magic box television showed thousands of people marching and supporting the students. Then he came forward and said, this is a revolution greater than the first one.
Khomeini lui-même, il l'a appelé la deuxième révolution. Parce que pour Khomeini, l'affaire des otages, c'était continuer le dynamisme révolutionnaire. Khomeini, c'était un homme par nature qui était incapable de gérer plus qu'un village. Mais il était capable de mener un mouvement révolutionnaire d'une manière permanente.
The students claimed to be acting on their own, but the Revolutionary Guard's involvement suggested Khomeini was behind the occupation.
Les gardiens étaient sous son ordre. Comment ils pouvaient participer à la prise d'otages sans même informer leur commandant en chef, qui était Khomeini.
The next day, Khomeini sent his son Ahmad to the embassy, condoning the occupation. Bazargan and Yazdi resigned in protest. Iran's new foreign minister was Bani Sadr.
Et après, je suis allé voir M. Khomeini et il m'a assuré que non, dès qu'on est sûr que le Shah, les Américains ne le reconnaîtront pas comme chef d'État de l'Iran et qu'il sera renvoyé des États-Unis, on va libérer les otages. Donc ma tâche, c'était de préparer la libération des otages.
Bani Sadr devised a plan. At the Security Council, he would declare the hostage-taking illegal, opening the door for the UN to condemn American interference in Iran. He could then release the hostages.
Moi, j'étais à ce moment-là représentant d'Iran au Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies. Bani Sadr m'avait demandé de partir. Avant de partir, j'ai dit à Bani Sadr, mais il faut que je sois sûr que Khomeini est d'accord avec notre projet. Khomeini m'a donné son accord. Je suis allé, j'ai dit à Khomeini, voilà. Il ne s'est absolument pas posé. Il a dit, je ne suis pas diplomate, je ne comprends pas très bien, mais faites, que Dieu soit avec vous.
Bani Sadr was about to fly to New York when Khomeini announced Iran would not participate at the UN Security Council. He thought Khobzadeh was responsible for changing the Imam's mind.
Et à l'aéroport de Téhéran, j'ai démissionné et j'ai dit à M. Khobzadeh, c'est votre tour. Vous avez fait ce que vous avez fait et maintenant c'est à vous de le gérer. Ah, il a nié, non, j'ai rien fait. J'ai dit que vous avez, moi et vous, nous savions très bien que ce que vous avez fait. Et maintenant, c'est votre tour.
They developed a certain amount of contempt for each other and rivalry, and they weren't seeing the big picture. They weren't seeing that that events had overtaken them completely. And they couldn't seem to bury their differences enough to work together in concert, which may have been their only hope.
On the 29th of November, Khobzadeh assumed the post of foreign minister and the job of ending the hostage crisis. For 2 months, US citizens had been imprisoned inside their own embassy. Iran's new foreign minister had a plan to force their release, but he needed America's help.
Khomeini almost regarded Khobzadeh as a son, and therefore we thought that there was a fair chance that Hopesade might spin out this scenario in a way that would permit him to argue with Khomeini that the hostages should be released.
Both sides conspired to give Hopesade some leverage. They agreed on a UN commission to denounce America's interference in Iran. After a year of revolution, Carol and Sadegh met in Paris. Their relationship had remained a closely guarded secret.
He had me stay at the embassy that night, and he wasn't careful enough. He wasn't careful enough. He knew the danger, but he'd lived his whole life with danger. He'd been trailed by Sabak. They had tried to assassinate him at one point. It was part of his life, living with that kind of danger.
In Paris, Hopesade met secretly with the Americans to discuss the scenario. He didn't even tell his lover.
I'm glad I didn't know, because if that had been widely reported and believed in Iran, then how the mullahs would have spun that to mean that Sadegh was an agent of the Americans and was working against the revolution. Because he was treading a very, very, very dangerous line between trying to sound like he's on board and at the same time understanding he had to get those hostages out.
The day before the UN commission was to arrive, Khomeini suddenly announced the Iranian parliament would decide the hostages' fate.
Hopesade, who was putting it together, and in many cases we suspected, everybody involved in the thing suspected, that he was telling us what he wanted us to hear and was telling us more than he could produce. And that was the key point. You know, when push comes to shove, will he be able to keep the assurances that he's given us?
The UN Commission arrived in Tehran on the 23rd of February and met with Hopesade. He was astonished to learn that none of the participants knew of the scenario. They had not been briefed by Secretary General Waldheim.
Ils ne leur avaient pas dit que le résultat de leurs investigations était connu d'avance, etc. Donc ils ont tout arrêté, la discussion s'est arrêtée tout de suite. Ils sont partis. Ils sont rentrés à leur hôtel et ils se sont mis à téléphoner à Waldheim pour demander des explications. Ça a duré, je ne sais pas, un jour ou deux. Et ensuite, ils ont accepté, enfin, de faire leurs investigations, etc. Mais le fait qu'à peine 20 minutes ou une demi-heure après être rentré chez le ministre des Finances, il soit sorti agité comme il l'était, manifestement très ému, les gens n'ont pas compris à Téhéran. Ils étaient furieux. Ils se disaient, mais qu'est-ce que c'est que cette commission? C'est des rigolos.
No messy political situation is going to be dealt with in fine print. We knew they were going to come back and say the Iranians feel this, 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 and this about the United States. That was their purpose. So, I mean, I dealt enough with the Arab-Israeli peace process to know that you don't fine-tune down to the last note on the violin in a symphony how you can orchestrate a situation like this. It's not orchestratable.
The commission heard from several victims of the Shah's regime, but the students refused them access to the hostages.
They have to do it one way or the other, and it's enough.
Would you be willing to have another member of the Revolutionary Council go in your place?
Actually, I never was very keen of going and seeing these guys for what they have done. Somebody else goes, I don't care, but they have to obey them.
Hopesade asked Khomeini's permission to take control of the hostages. The Ayatollah gave his blessing, but the students demanded a written order from Iran's newly elected president, Bani Sadr.
Sadegh a dit, pas de problème. Il a téléphoné à Bani Sadr devant moi. Et Bani Sadr a discuté, puis il a dit qu'il allait envoyer la lettre. Et on a attendu la lettre. Et pendant qu'on attendait la lettre, il y avait des manifestations devant l'ambassade. Et on avait l'impression, et quand on est reparti, quand on a vu ça, on avait l'impression, regardez l'écran, qu'il y avait des millions de gens qui défilaient, etc. Et Sadegh a dit, bon, c'est trop tard, il fallait faire, on aurait pu le faire, maintenant c'est trop tard, c'est fini, on a manqué cette occasion, il faudra trouver autre chose, etc. Et on est rentré avec Villalon à l'hôtel. Et quand on arrive à l'hôtel, on dit à des journalistes, mais qu'est-ce qui s'est passé, ces millions de gens qui manifestaient? Ils nous ont dit, mais il n'y a jamais eu des millions de gens qui manifestaient devant l'ambassade. Comment ça? On a vu ça à la télévision. Ah oui, mais ça, vous savez, c'est comme ça qu'on fait de la télévision ici.
On the 10th of March, Khomeini insisted the UN Commission report its findings before leaving Iran. He said nothing about releasing the hostages. The next day, the Commission left.
We were dealing with what we thought was a reasonable probability that Sadegh could make a persuasive case, given what the scenario gave him to work with. We just operated on the assumption that Khomeini would act as the spirit moved him at a particular moment, and apparently somebody else got to him and moved the spirit in a somewhat different direction from the one we would have preferred.
Si vous étiez à la place de Khomeini et que vous voyez des gens qui font quelque chose pour donner une gifle à quelqu'un que vous avez toujours dénoncé comme étant le grand Satan et qui disent qu'en faisant ça, ils suivent votre enseignement, est-ce que vous pouvez dire ils se trompent?
After 6 months of diplomacy, President Carter saw no alternative but to use force. With the American elections looming, opinion polls judged his handling of the hostage crisis a disaster.
Either you go for a rescue mission, or you just sit back and fold your hands and wait until Khomeini was ready to give them up. And in the middle of a political campaign, that was a very hard thing for anybody to do.
On the morning of the 25th of April, the world learned of the US military's failed attempt to rescue its citizens. 8 American soldiers died in the desert, 400 kilometers south of Tehran. Sadeh's failed scenario left Bani Saad in charge. He promised to free the hostages after Iran's parliamentary elections. In May 1980, vote rigging and intimidation marked Iran's long-awaited parliamentary elections. The IRP, Iran's clerical party, won the majority of seats, rendering Bani Saad powerless. On the 27th of July, the Shah died in Cairo, his body ravaged by cancer. In the same month, Khomeini reopened negotiations with the Americans.
Khomeini, comme stratège politique, a pris l'affaire des otages en otage lui-même pour pouvoir mener à bien son stratégie politique. Son stratégie politique qui était d'avoir un gouvernement et un parlement et un président qui lui obéirait à chaque moment.
On the 4th of November, the first anniversary of the hostage-taking, Carter was defeated by Ronald Reagan in the US elections. Khomeini had effectively chosen America's next president.
Il voulait imposer la dictature de Mullah, donc il se servit des otages pour renvoyer M. Carter. Donc pour les Mollahs, Reagan, c'était préférable. Ce qui pouvait permettre aux Mollahs en Iran de justifier la mainmise, leur mainmise, leur dictature, si vous voulez.
Bani Saad later accused Khomeini of delaying the hostages' release in exchange for weapons promised by Reagan's campaign team. Gary Sick spent 10 years investigating those allegations.
The whole Ronald Reagan campaign, played this very nasty game with the Iranians. Although there was plenty of circumstantial evidence, there was no documents from any of these dealings back and forth. Whether it becomes a historical reality depends on somebody's deathbed confession.
Khomeini released the hostages minutes after Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. They had spent 444 days in captivity. Secret shipments of weapons to Iran surfaced 5 years later in the Iran-Contra scandal. Sadegh Khobzadeh became an enemy of the revolution.
He never forgave himself for helping to bring this nightmare to his country. Which it's why he wouldn't escape at the end. Myself and others were prepared to help him get out of Iran, and he refused to go. When we said goodbye, I didn't know if I'd ever see him again. Even then, it was hard to believe Khomeini would actually ever kill him.
In 1982, Khomeini sentenced the man he called his son to death.
Le fils de Khomeini est allé le voir et lui a dit « Écris une lettre de pardon ». Et Khobzadeh a dit « C'est à Khomeini de demander pardon, c'est pas à moi ». Parce que Khomeini a promis des choses à Paris et ailleurs aux gens et il fait le contraire.
Khobzadeh was just one of the tens of thousands to die in Khomeini's jails.
On peut dire qu'au moins plus de 30-40 000 personnes ont été exécutées.
Over the next decade, 4 million Iranians fled Khomeini's medieval regime. In 1989, the supreme leader died. Despite 10 years of repression, isolation and war, millions of Iranians mourned his death. Khomeini's revolution had inspired militant Muslims around the world to pursue their own radical interpretations of the Quran.
It is a great seismic event of the 20th and 21st centuries. It is one of the world forces that needs to be dealt with, not just in our world, not just in the West. In the Islamic world, at least here in the West, we still live under governments that are representative of our human rights and our democratic rights. In the Islamic world, they are threatened with this kind of intolerant, medieval religious theocracy. Look what happened in Afghanistan. Look at the poor women of Afghanistan. It all comes from Khomeini. He released all that.
The children of Khomeini's Iran will continue to struggle for freedom.